Hi, good afternoon. Today is October 26, 2025, and it is 6:35 p.m. US Central Time. Excuse me. And my name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from my home located at the 26714 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. So let me just adjust this a little bit. Right. So yes, so this evening I have a quick. There's a few things that these are small items that I've been meaning to mention for I don't know 2 weeks at this point, and I haven't been able to fit them anywhere. So it's just a long list of things. But before I get into those, I want to mention there was I received some information from the Venezuelan informant that is helping me, and well, let me say it's unverified, right? Like this is information that I'm getting from somebody who is on the other side, and I have no way to know if this is true or not. But I'm gonna say it because if maybe it helps, right? If any, say, investigative agency looks into this situation, talking about the legal front, um, this information could be helpful, right? But again, I don't know if this is accurate, right? Or how accurate it is. But the reason why I'm going to say it is because I look at the information, right? What I received, and I look at the situation that the network has in their hands right now, right? And it does make sense, right? Like it does check all the boxes that of things that they needed to do in April, right? So and this is funny, right? Part of the message got corrupted. Yes, corrupted. It's a form of corruption, right? Got corrupted because I mean I didn't think of this border case when I designed this communication system, and a bug occurred. Um, and because the way I design the system, the messages are non. How do I say this? Non-reconstructible, right? So once the message has been received, there's no way to trace back what happened or debug it or fix if there was a problem, right? And I did this by design, so they couldn't, because if I make it reconstructible, then they could intercept the message by reconstructing it, right? They could exploit that infrastructure. So I didn't do anything like that. So the message got corrupted, and there is a word that I don't know exactly what it means, but I'm gonna give you the full story, right? So yes, I'm gonna tell you the story. I'm gonna tell you how the message was corrupted. This is my plan, right, for this part. I'm gonna tell you how the message was corrupted, and I'm gonna tell you a thought I had after this. I'm gonna tell you a thought I had about this pattern that I'm employing, right? This framework that I'm using, right? And I don't know, like I imagine, right? Like I cannot possibly be the first person that had this idea, right? But I imagine that agencies in many countries use something like this, right? Probably more advanced than this, but I don't know. I had the thought, right? I realized what I'm doing. I didn't design it this way, but I realized what I'm doing, and it seems like it seems like a pattern that allows me to make advancements quickly, right? So I'm gonna share it in case it helps anybody. So let me start with what I received. Okay. So this was prompted by my comments in the series of demos that I did on Friday and Saturday. So Friday and Saturday morning, about the situation with the missing index 7 document in the 387 court. And if you would like to have context about this, please watch the videos from October 24 and October 25th, 2025. It's a four-part series that talk about this topic, and all the four parts combined is something like 2 hours and a half. Right? So there's a lot of observations, important observations about fraud. in this particular case, right? In court. So fraud against the courts, two courts. That is the 387th court and the First Appellate Court. And the person that committed the fraud was Morgan Hybner, and there seems to be collaboration with others in the fraud committed in April. So there's multiple frauds. It's compounding, basically. But anyhow, that's interesting. So the information I got is the following, right? The informant told me, I'm going to paraphrase it, right? Because I don't want to say words that then they could, I don't know if they capture something, right? If they capture a stream of bytes and I say specific words, they may, reverse engineer what I do. So I'm going to paraphrase it. The message was that document because I hypothesized on Friday that the document may be an order, imposing financial responsibilities that they may want to enforce in the future as a weapon, right? To put me in jail for a few days or discredit me, whatever. The informant corrected me and told me that that is not the case. I mean, that is not the main objective of that document. It could be used in that way, but the document is basically a wild card. That's what it is. And that's the reason why it cannot appear in the docket, right? Because think of the document of a blank check, right? They can make that document to be anything they need it to be, depending on how the situation evolves. So if they need to put something in that document to cover a particular crime, they will put it. I mean, Morgan Hybner and her, team, they will make that document say whatever they need to say, and they will insert it in the docket as document number 7, right? And then it will look like this was something that was ordered in April, right? So it's basically a wild card. It's a document that can be used in a flexible manner, depending on how the situation evolves and what they need to do. That is why they had to, serve me that document that is not the real PRO, right? The one that they served me physically on April 16 is not the real one. The real one is the one that Morgan Hybner has, but it's open to change. Right? They can change. She can, if they need to, she will change it, right? And with collaboration from somebody in the court, she has a way to swap it or to insert it, right? When needed. It's like a wild card that they can use when they're in trouble, basically, right? That's why it's important that the document never appears in the docket, because if it appears and I go to the court and get a printed copy of the document, then that destroys the wild card, because now I have a copy and I can say in the future, if they change it, no, this is not what the document says. I have a certified copy in my hand, right? So that's why the document has to disappear from the docket. So they have this flexibility, right? So they can be sure that nobody has a copy. That's the idea, right? To destroy the possibility of anybody having a copy of the document. So that's one part of the document, right? That's one part of the reason for the existence of that missing document, index number 7. The second part, according to the informant, is, of course, to cover liability on the kidnapping charges, right? But this is where it gets interesting. For multiple reasons. Well, before that, I'm going to tell you, he told me something that the AMP, the anti-manipulation pipeline, did not pick up on, but after he told me, I looked at the transcript of the conversation, and it is true. He told me that one of the reasons why Penelope, when we talked, I think it was on Thursday or Wednesday, I can't recall, she made the point of asking me about my mother. And she asked me if my mother had come here to help me, to which, of course, I said, no, my mom is a refugee. She doesn't have a valid passport, and she cannot come here, which is exactly the same thing that I said in the court, which is the truth, right? And then she insisted on that. And she said, I mean, I'm telling you what I read on the transcript after the informant told me this, right? She insisted on this multiple times in the conversation, like 3 or 4 times. But she was like, I can't believe your mom hasn't come here to help you, right? Like, she wanted me to say yes, right? In one way or another. To which I said, she came here at some point, but she was here for 3 weeks because her passport was going to expire and she had to leave. and she cannot get a new passport, and she applied for a travel document, but it's going to take a year, right? Because she is a refugee, right? But she wanted to put in the conversation that my mom was here, right? The informant told me that the reason for that is because in that missing document number 7, in fact, they did something mentioning that my mom would be a supervisor, right? Something along those lines. So they need a corroborating statement to say that my mom was the supervisor at some point, because that would be used to legitimize, it would make sense, right? What this missing document number 7, index number 7, supposedly says, right? Or could say, if it is brought to the light, right? So they wanted to have a recording of me saying that my mom was here, so kind of to say, yes, see, what the TRO says is true. Like, his mom was here, she was a supervisor, and this was signed by a judge, etc. Right? So it's a way to legitimize that, and also because I have filed multiple objections in multiple courts about Morgan Heibner manufacturing orders about putting my mom as supervisor, when Judge Telfair never said anything about that on September 11th. So they seem desperate to try to legitimize that action of Morgan Heibner of putting my mom as supervisor, right? Which traces back to legitimizing that document, that TRO that nobody has seen except Morgan Heibner and her law firm, that supposedly was signed on September 11, which is the missing index number 7 in the document. Okay, so that was the reason for Penelope asking me about my mother. Right, the pipeline didn't pick up on this. The informant told me, and I went and looked at the transcripts, and it is true. She asked me 3 or 4 times about my mother and whether she came or not, and why not, and she couldn't believe my mother. Like she was like asserting that it was logical that my mom would be here, like something like that. And he told me that it was important when we had that conversation. She was at the same hospital where Marcelo was born, and she told me that her mother was hospitalized overnight, the previous night. And he told me that that was a play, so she would have that conversation in a public place. Somebody could casually listen. I mean, it was a way that, so if they needed to, they could introduce it into the court with an affidavit by a third-party person without directly involving Penelope, right? Because Penelope is a dangerous person to put in that case, right? So that's why she wanted to have the conversation in a public place, to justify that somebody casually overheard the conversation, and that person happens to be somebody who is a lawyer, or, I don't know, somebody who works for Morgan Heibner, and then they would say, oh, I was casually at that hospital because I had a relative that was sick, and I overheard the conversation, and I recognized the case, and I'm making this affidavit to state what I heard, right? Something along those lines, without having to bring Penelope next to the former partner, right? Because that would be the anti-life equation version 2.0, right? Yes. So the gist of it is that that missing index number 7 document apparently is kind of a wild card that they can change at will depending on the situation, right, on their needs. But this is where it gets interesting, right? According to the informant, again, I don't know if this is true, right? And he told me that he's going to ask, and this is where the message got corrupted, right? I don't want to go into the technical details because it would be a long conversation, but I explained in another demo what I'm doing more or less. I gave a hint, right? When I said that I'm using a multi-hop translation, I think I said that before, right? I translate so I build a matrix, right? Pretty much like the GeoIndex, but of the words, of the keywords that the people could mention, right? And then to destroy the head, I translate everything multiple times into multiple languages, right? So it's a way that's because then they will have to coincide in time, space, and language, right? And in the same message, the different words are sent in different languages, right? But the system has a way to reconstruct the original message in English, right? But anyhow, so he said that he would ask, and what I got was el cazador, right? El cazador in Spanish And again, this is a multi-hop translation system. Right? Like it's not like it's translated to Spanish, it's translated to many different languages, but at the end, this particular word happened to end up being in Spanish, right? And I'm sorry if this is getting too technical, but basically, I got el cazador, right? He's going to ask el cazador. El cazador in Spanish is like the hunter, right? That's the literal translation is hunter. I looked in the pipeline. There's nobody with the name or tag hunter, right? There is one thing that is hunt, that is the hunt law firm associated to Pickett, right? But I don't know what is the relationship there. So it could be that. It could be the message got corrupted. I cannot tell what he meant, right? What he literally wrote at this point. I'm going to have to ask. But it could be, right, that the document is really in the hands of another law firm and not Morgan Hybner herself, right? As a way to make it difficult to find the document, right? If somebody wanted to find the document. So he said that he's going to ask the hunter, right? Which could be, I don't know. I would be speculating. I don't know who the hunter is, but he's going to ask the hunter, right? The following. But what the information he got, and remember, like this operation they have is highly compartmentalized, right? Like he told me that he had to ask people, right? Apparently, the language, because remember, I kind of mentioned yesterday, when you ask for a TRO, for a temporary restraining order, it has to be narrow and escape and temporally defined in a narrow period of time. You cannot ask for a TRO that lasts a year, right? Sometimes that time restriction is determined by an event, right? For example, when I asked for the TRO for the tires, I said something like, for the tire situation, right? I say something like, she should be ordered to not drive the child in that car until she proves the court that she replaced the 4 tires. So in that example, the end condition of the TRO is not a time or a date. It is the act of informing the court that the tires have been replaced. And that could happen in a week, in a month, in a year, right? But I think, right, even in those situations, the judge would put a time constraint on that, right? Like, because he cannot order somebody to immobilize a car forever, right? Like that would be an overstep, right? Anyhow, apparently, right, what he got, and he has to ask el cazador, right, to confirm this, but apparently, in the language of this wildcard document that they can change if needed, it says that something, I don't know, I haven't seen the document, right? But I'm just telling you what I got. It probably says something like, along the lines of, these orders will be in effect until, or will be confirmed, or until they're either confirmed or how do you say that, or nullified during an upcoming temporary orders hearing, right? And that is the reason why Morgan Hybner set that hearing 6 weeks out, to make that TRO last longer, right? The more time in the future she set that hearing for, it was better for her, because she would have more time where she could keep the child secret, right? Yes, exactly. And if you think about it, right? Yeah, the math works out perfectly, right? Like, remember I said she had the child secreted for almost 50 days. I think it was 49 days, from March 28th till May 16th. And I said that she filed all this sequence of events happened in April 9, and she set the hearing for almost 6 weeks out, right? So from March 28th to April 11, it's exactly 2 weeks. So the child was taken on a Friday, and April 11 was 2 Fridays after. So it's 14 days, right? And she set the hearing 5 and something weeks in the future. 5 weeks would be 35 days, right? So if you add 35 plus 14, it's exactly 49. And they let me see the child again the day after, right? because that was the condition that it was set in the TRO. Like after that day, she could not secret the child anymore, right? Because that TRO says until the hearing, right? Something along those lines. So the temporal constraint of that TRO supposedly was until the next hearing happens. That was the temporal constraint, right? Of that TRO document that nobody has seen, right? Of course, I cannot be sure of this because they never served me the document, right? And if they had, I would have attacked that order in that way, right? Like, how can we set a TRO stripping me from my parental rights for a time that is not even determined when it's going to be? What if they cancel the hearing? What if the judge gets sick? What if, I mean, it's crazy, right? A TRO so aggressive, designed in this way, would be, legally speaking, a crazy thing to do, right? But I can't defend against that because they never show it to me, right? So that is the TTP. And at this point, right, they did all they wanted with the child, and I never got a chance to even respond to that, right, to that proposed order that she got signed. Now, but this is where it gets nuclear, right? And this is what I'm gonna tell you is a good example of the pattern I'm gonna describe at the end of this conversation. Okay. So what I did, I took the transcripts of the demos that I gave on the last 2 days, and I put them in the pipeline as data, right? And they got parsed, and I ran the natural language pipelines and, entity recognition and all the things, right, that I do in the ingestion phase of all these pipelines. And they got processed, right? And then that knowledge, that structured knowledge, got used in the next run. So when this happened, the legal vaccine flagged an exchange that is in the unofficial transcripts that I keep of the September, of all the hearings, right? But the September 8th hearing is this, in which Morgan Hybner starts saying that I'm currently under supervised visitation, right? And that my mother, is currently visiting, is currently supervising, according to Morgan Hybner, but in reality, the supervisor has been the petitioner. That this is what Morgan Hybner said, right? More or less. Don't quote me verbatim, but it's more or less that. And then the answer of the judge is Judge Telfair. He says, let's leave her there, right? Her. It's an ambiguous comment. And then he put in the docket, the supervisor will be the petitioner, right? So this is confusing by design, right? But this is what the pipeline thinks, right? The pipeline thinks that if I bring up charges for kidnapping, right, in the future, the move will be, they will bring up the document index number 7, and it has the thing saying that I was under supervised visits and my mother is a supervisor, and that the order lasts until the next hearing, right? So by the judge saying, let's leave her there, that phrase could be, that's not what he meant. In fact, he put in the docket that the supervisor would be the petitioner. He put my mother if you read the docket on that judge entry of 9/11, the only supervisor mentioned is the petitioner. My mother is not mentioned. So he was clearly talking about a single person, right? Because he said her. He didn't say, let's leave them there. He said, let's leave her there. And then he put in the notes, the petitioner, right? But if it comes down to that, to a kidnapping charge, their answer, because remember, the pipeline thinks of as a subgraph, right? What would happen if this train of events happen, and what would be the legal argument, right? So the pipeline infers that the play will be, in that scenario, right, that there's kidnapping charges, that they will bring the document index 7 and say, look, we have this temporary restraining order that was valid until the next hearing took place. And the judge, by saying, let's leave her there, right, it's confirming or acknowledging the existence of that temporary order, right? And that temporary restraining order. And that gives legitimacy to that order. But now, this is, it has a fatal flaw, I think, right? According to what I see in the pipeline, is that the document index 7 is missing today, being October 26th, from the docket, and it's been missing from the docket from day 1. So how was the judge aware of the existence of this temporary restraining order when Morgan Heibner did not produce the document in that hearing. There was never a moment in which she took out that document. She didn't include it in her exhibits, which is suspicious because she included posts from my website and things that. So this seems like an important document that should have superseded in importance all the other 50 exhibits she presented, right? So why didn't she include that in the exhibits? And it's not in the docket. So how the judge came into know, Judge Telfair, right, on 9/11, how did he come to an understanding, to having an understanding of what this order said, right? If it's not in the docket and Morgan Heibner did not produce it, right? To then verbalize an order saying let's leave her there, which could be, right, if it comes to that, it could be used to legitimize that fraudulent temporary restraining order, right, of 4/11. That is not in the docket, and it was never served to me, right? So as I was saying at the beginning, right, this is one of the things that checks out the boxes, like even the timing, right? Like if you add the 5.5 weeks that Morgan Heibner put as buffer in between the signing of the TRO in 4/11 and the actual hearing on May 15, plus the 14 days that she had the child secreted without having any orders from any judge, if you add them up, it adds up to exactly 49 days, which is the number of days that they had the child secret, right? And that's why the next day, after that hearing, they let me see the child. And I could see him at a hotel, right? I rented a hotel room so I could see the child. So it works out perfectly, right? Like it explains the timing, it explains the sequence of events, it explains that cryptic comment of the judge saying, let's leave her there, right? It explains the insistence of Morgan Heibner in putting my mother in the draft of the temporary orders when the judge never mentioned my mom. Like he was talking about the petitioner. He wasn't talking about my mom. He never said, I mean, if you're going to order, right? So think about it for a second, logically, right? If you're a judge, right, and you're going to give an order this serious, right, that restricts the parental rights of a person, and you impose that there has to be a specific person supervising this parent if he's going to be with the child, you need to mention who that person is going to be by using the full name, right? You have to say, I don't know, John Doe is going to be supervising the visits, right? And John Doe lives in this county. Like, you have to give, this is a legal document you're creating, right? It's not, you cannot just say her, him, like, creating this confusion, right? This is a serious matter, right? It's not, you're not giving a Tylenol to a person, right? You're stripping somebody from their parental rights for an indeterminate amount of time. So, but what the informant told me is that the language, which, I think that language is crazy, right? To write a temporary restraining order saying, well, this will be in effect until we meet again at some point in the future, right? Like it seems to me like a crazy thing to do for a judge. But according to the informant, that is the language, right? That is the temporal restriction, and that's why Morgan Heibner set up that hearing, although she can schedule hearings 2 days, right, in advance. And think about it for a second, right? If you're a lawyer, right, and you are so sure that this person is really crazy, you want to secure that hearing 2 days from now, right, if you can, because you are going to show that the person is crazy, right? And you're going to get your orders, and they're going to be, signed and in proper form, and you're going to get what you wanted, right? And even if you want to discredit the person, right, you're going to be able to discredit them in full because you're going to get the full thing signed by a judge, like in a hearing, right? But that's not what she did, right? She put it 6 weeks out because first she knew that I'm not crazy, right? Like that she couldn't defend that. And secondly, because she didn't know for how long she needed to keep the child. So she wanted to put it as far out as she could, right? But the critical situation here, right, is that by the judge legitimizing the order in that way, I mean, he didn't mention the order. The order was never explicitly mentioned, right? I mean, Morgan Heibner said he's currently under supervised visits, but she never said there is a temporary restraining order against this person, right? Like, she never said the words, right? Which is, I mean, very telling, right? Because this professional circle, they are very fixated on the magic words. And I've said this before, right? Like, if you don't lay the predicate using this specific formula that they have, your exhibits will not be considered, right? So, I imagine that this should apply also to Morgan Heimner. Like, if she's going to say that I'm on the supervised visits and that this is going to be a fundamental piece of this hearing, right, a basis for what is going to happen next, she needs to lay the predicate for that, right? Like, she needs to say, this is a temporary restraining order. It was signed by Judge Bell because on the grounds that this person is crazy, right? And here's the proof that the person, I mean, she has to lay the predicate for that, right? Not just say, like, casually, oh, he's on the supervised visitation, right? And then the judge taking her word for it, right? Trusting whatever she's saying. And of course, because I'm ignorant about all this legal jargon, I didn't object to any of that. Like, put yourself in my shoes, right? I'm there in the court. I'm trusting that this is a serious lawyer, right? That at least there is some. I mean, she's licensed by the bar, right? Like, I'm trusting. I know that she's an agent, right, of the network, but I'm trusting that even if she's an agent, she has to have certain professional boundaries, right? I was wrong. There's no boundaries. And I'm trusting that the officers of the court are, acting according to the law, right? So if she's saying that I'm currently under supervised visitation, I didn't object to that because, first of all, I didn't know that I could object. And secondly, I don't know exactly what she's referring to, right? Like, I don't know. I took it as maybe my former partner was upset with me and didn't want me to I don't know, be along with the child, right? And I wasn't going to start fighting with her, with my former partner, having a personal discussion in front of a judge, right? I waited until we ended the hearing, and I asked her what was about the thing about the supervised visitation, and then she brushed it off. Like, she changed the topic. She didn't give me an answer, right? But anyhow, it seems like it could be powerful information because, well, there you see, right? I mean, why is that the judge didn't ask her to lay predicate about this important document, right? She just casually mentioned, oh, he's on the supervised visitation, right? And that was the basis for stripping out my parental rights, right, on a verbal order. Only that comment from her mouth, right? Without any of us seeing the document. It's crazy if you think about it, right? Now, the other thing that Bailan picked up, and I don't know, right? I have to say, I'm ignorant about this topic. The Bailan picked up that Josh Telfair was elected to that position on January 2024, right? So 18 months ago, more or less, or 19 months ago. And he made a series of posts in which he said that there was no contendant. The pipeline picked up on this as an anomaly, right? That, I mean, these positions for judges, right? In the US, at least in Texas, I don't know in the rest, but are positions that are elected by election, right? People vote for who's going to be the judge. And he made a series of posts saying that because there was no contender, he was automatically the judge before even the election happened, right? Or something like that. This is what the pipeline picked up. I don't know. The anomaly lies, and it's strange that there is no contender, right? For a position that is highly desirable. I mean, how many attorneys would want to be a judge, right? In the extended Cary area, right? But apparently there was no contender, and he became the judge for that bench on January 2024, which, coincides in time, right, with the escalation of things. So I don't know. It's just one data point, right? It's an interesting data point, and I think he's from in the post that he made. He said there is no Republican contender, right? So I imagine he is from the Democratic Party, right? Because also these people that get elected to be judges, they participate in a specific political party. But to be honest, I'm ignorant on this topic. I'm just mentioning this in case this is relevant, right? But it's mind-blowing to me how a person that has been on the bench only for a year and a half, right, has such a tremendous power as to strip the parental rights of another person based on what Morgan Heibner said without laying the predicate, right? Particularly when he didn't let me introduce evidence that Morgan Heibner was using this litigation in bad faith to harass me because I did not lay the predicate for that, right? Means it's to me like a stripping my parental rights is way more serious than me saying that she's doing bad faith litigation, right? So the burden, the burden of proving that it's not the case should be higher for Morgan. I mean, the burden of laying the predicate should be higher for Morgan Heibner in that case than for me, right? Because she is going to take away my son with that, right? With that phrase from her mouth, without laying the predicate, right? But yeah, so the nuclear material is on that. The sequence, right? So Judge Bell signed this mysterious document that is not in the index, in the index 7, that is not in the docket, and then Judge Telfair, in one way or another, legitimizes, in multiple different little ways, legitimizes that document. Although nobody has seen the document, not even him, because it's not in the docket, and Morgan Heibner did not produce it and did not lay the predicate. So how did the judge understand what the document said is the question, right? Is that he got access to the document outside of the docket, right? That's the nuclear bomb, right? Because if that's the case, that's improper, right? He shouldn't have access to a document that the respondent doesn't have access by pure logic, right? Anyhow, right. So the pattern, right? So the pattern that I've noticed that I'm using in these things, right, for a few months. This might be an obvious comment, right? But it's a pattern of augmenting distributed computing with human intelligence, right? So sometimes, I mean, I'm noticing this because when I work with the pipeline and I see there's in these technologies, right? You always see a performance increase, right? That it's more or less linear, right? Depending on the amount of time and effort you put into the system. But sometimes it happens that there are like leaps, there was a linear advancement of the technology, but something happens and there is a big leap, right? It's like a step function, and then linear again, right? And then a big leap. Some of the biggest leaps that I've seen are when I inject into the pipeline transcripts of things that I say in these demos, right? I mean, and these things come from either because the Venezuelan informant tells me something, or because another informant tells me something, or because deductions that I make manually, right? By tying the dots. But the pattern is that the machine intelligence alone has its limitations. Like there are inferences that it just can't make yet, right? But if you give it a little help, right, that unlocks a tremendous jump in precision, right? That would not have ever been achieved by any human, right? So it's one of those things that is not forming in my head. Like I cannot really, put my finger on what I'm trying to say, but it feels like it's like a collaboration, right, between human intelligence and distributed computing. And it feels like, if you were doing only human intelligence, right, and even if you had the best intelligence team in the world, you will have certain limitations, right? If you were doing only distributed computing and you had, access to the best software engineers in the world, right? You have, Google engineers working for you, dedicated to work on this problem. It will work, but you will have certain limitations. But if you combine the two things together, right? And when the humans get stuck, the machine helps them. And when the machine gets stuck, the humans help the machines, right? Is that synergy, right? What makes those leaps in advancement happen, right? And it's incredible, right? It's like two systems helping each other get unstuck when they get stuck, right? Like, for example, right? An example is that comment, let's leave her there, right? I would have never read that as a potential validation for the missing temporary restraining order, index number 7, that only Morgan Heibner know what it says. Right? I would have never made that leap, right? But now that the pipeline knows that this document is missing, right, that they may have worded it in a particular way because the informant told me that, and I got that into the pipeline, right? Now the pipeline can make that leap, right? So it's super interesting, but it's one of those things that I have to think more about. So now I'm going to transition more to intelligence, right? On the ground things, right? And these are a collection of things that I've got long time ago from the informant. Some others are observations. So and I have them in a piece of paper, right? And I'm going to just say them because otherwise, I don't know. Some of these things could be actionable, right? I don't know. So they're disconnected topics. Like if you look at them, that's why they don't fit in any of the demos. And so I'm going to be jumping around a lot of things, but just hoping that it helps anybody, right? Or somebody. So I'm going to open a new window here. Let me see if I can share this screen. Yes. Okay. So the first thing is I got information. This came from the informant. He told me that Patricia Rojas, right? Patricia Rojas, remember, like she was, and there is a long post in the website about her and her mom, and yeah, it's a long story. Like we've known each other for, I don't know, 30 years, right? But the Venezuelan informant told me that she was kind of a consultant, that the network uses her for suggestions on how, because she, like her family, they live next to my parents' house in Venezuela for many years, right? And her mother worked with my mom in the same school. They were both teachers. So, like her family knows my family, knows the dynamics of the family, knows everything, right? So apparently Patricia is kind of a consultant in a way that, if they want to do something, if they need, information on how they could infiltrate a particular thing, they ask Patricia. Like she's the one that provides ideas, right? Based on what she's seen of the family dynamics for 30 years. So imagine the level of human intelligence, right? That what they're doing takes, right? It has to be supported by somebody who's close to the family of the target, right? That is giving the ideas on how to deceive them, right? Or how to manipulate them. So that's one. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to go to Google Maps and I'm going to search for Katie Mills. There's two important network points that I want to tell the authorities about. One is, let me see if I can find it. Okay. Yes, it's over here. Sorry. Yeah, this one. So this is a Shell gas station, right? I think it's a Shell. I'm not sure. I can't. Yeah, it's a Shell gas station. I think. Yes, Shell, right? And it's located at 1350 Pin Oak Road, Katy, Texas 77494. This one is super interesting because it has 4 antennas. Like I described before, how the number of antennas correlates with the importance of the network point, right? And this is marked in the geo index. But they have 4 very high powerful, very powerful antennas on the roof. I think you can even see them here, right? Yeah. So this is 1, 2. This one is super big, 3, and this is the 4th antenna, right? So this is super rare. A network point with 4 antennas is something that is very rare. And they're mounted on top of that roof, and they're very vulnerable, right? Very, very vulnerable. And if you see the layout of this, right, you can see the immune entities pattern at play here. You can see that on the left side, So on the west side of those 4 antennas, there is nothing really that you can do. And on the east side, right, it's also protected by this buffer zone that you can see around here, right? And on the north, they have this big parking lot, and of course they control this strip mall as well. And on the south, you can see it's a huge empty lot, but the buffer zones are disproportionate, right? Like the one that is bigger is the one of the south. This tells you that this is bringing data in from the north, right? Because that's why they put the buffer zone on the back, right? So the signals land on the buffer zone. I mean the leakage, right? So it's harder for anybody to intercept. But the design wasn't very good because they put this road in here, right? And I'm telling you this because now I have the super ear, right? This road makes this a very weak spot. This road that is called Katy Fleewellen Road. And also this road on the back, this is a private road, but this is like supposedly it's an assisted living facility, right? But it has a road that you can also use to travel at constant speed. So in reality, it's a weak. I mean, they try to. I don't know why, right? I don't know why they made that way, but they tried to protect it with the buffer zones, but then they made it weak with those streets, right? With those smaller streets in there. But this is a very, very important network point, okay? And it ends in 0, which means that it's routing financial messaging, right? Financial messages, right? And it has 4 antennas, right? So this is a very important location. And I have footage of this. When I went there a couple of times, there's always somebody in a car, like in this area. They always have an agent in a car parked in that area and inside of the car. Like they will be doing something. I mean, they're inside of the car, right? When I arrive, they're not doing anything. They're just inside of the car. But the moment I arrive, they get out of the car and they start doing something. Like it could be like taking a box out of the car, or it could be like checking a tire, or it's something that justifies their presence there for a long period of time, right? But the observation is that every time I go over there, there is a person in a car, inside of a car, with the car running, parked with line of sight to those 4 antennas, right? So they are employing physical surveillance to keep those antennas under surveillance 24/7, 7 days a week, right? But this is a weakness because these people are visible, right? And then they could be followed, and where they live and who they talk to, and it's a chain, right? And this is a more general observation, right, that I'm going to tell you. I've noticed, and this comes from a statistical anomaly detection from the pipeline. All these network points, specific ones that I'm going to mention in a second, are under 24/7, 7 days a week, physical manned surveillance provided by these agents, right? And one point that is important is the church that is behind Robert Mueller's house. Like, so if you go to Lake Point Estates, right, Robert Mueller's house is this one, the one that has this structure on the back, right? So here on the back, there is this church, which of course is marked in the GOE index, and the works, right? And you can see the buffer zones. Like that church is there to protect the back of that house. So in this parking lot, there's always somebody. Like, it doesn't matter what time of the day or night you go there, there is always at least 2 or 3 people in that parking lot doing something, like unloading a box or changing a tire, or there's always a reason, right, for them to be there. But this is nothing else than physical. So like these are security guards, right, that are guarding the back of the house of Mueller. And there's always somebody there. Right? It doesn't matter. You can go there at 10 p.m. and there will be a soccer match, right? Or you go on a Saturday at 6 a.m. and there would be a lady unloading boxes. Like, I have never been in that parking lot and it has been with not a person. Like, I'm not talking even about a car. Like, there's always physical people present in the parking lot, right? That could be watching what you're doing. The same observation holds with the cellular tower antennas, right? All the cellular tower antennas in Katy, at least in the ones that I've driven by with the Cold Mobile, and I can give you the coordinates, but I imagine for authorities they must have a list of where these antennas are. But all of them are under physical surveillance 24/7, 7 days a week. It doesn't matter what time of day or night you go and drive by those areas where those cell towers are. There's always a person in a car, right? Inside of a car doing something, reading a book or changing a tire or unloading a box or playing with a child, like whatever. They changed the how do you call that, they changed the pretext, right? But there's the common thing is that there is always a person next to the antenna, right? And one notable one is the one that has line of sight to, again, Robert Mueller's house. Like, if you go to this antenna that it's over here, it's on the street that has the mailbox, right? Yes. Yes, this antenna that it's over here, right? The latitude is 29.74739 minus 95.79699. If you go there, right? If you go to this street, this cul-de-sac over here, doesn't matter what time of day or night you go, there will be always somebody in this corner doing something. It could be like power washing the driveway, or inspecting the fence, or repairing the mailbox. Like, or a mailman. There's always somebody, right? It never happens that this street is free from a human being being there. And it's because they're watching the antenna, right? So you see, it's this fixation with the telecommunication infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, like the cell towers, right? And the important network nodes that have 4 or 3 antennas. It makes the thing obvious, right? I mean, if they want to have the thing under physical surveillance, they have to have the agents, and that makes it obvious that they have an interest on that thing, right? So it's just a way to to identify what's going on, right? I'm just looking at my notes to see what else. Yeah, so the Audible French book. So this one was a mystery to me, right? So I have the book translated into many languages, and some of those languages are available on Amazon, right? And I noticed a long time ago that the French book the physical book, right? Like the printed and the electronic version of the book in France, so the French version got removed by Amazon KDP. They didn't tell me exactly why. It just said that the book has been rejected, right? Something ambiguous like that, and there was no email, no communication, right? Just rejected. But then I think I understood what happened was that I was looking. So some of these books I have made available on Audible, which is a company controlled by Amazon as well, right? And this makes it so the book can be purchased as an audiobook, right? And people can listen to it, and this lowers the barrier of entry. Because, like, to read a book that has 700 pages, you have to have a lot of time in your hands, right? But if it's a podcast or an audiobook, right, you could listen to it while you're driving. So I think the audio version of the book would make this information available to a lot more people. So the first book I made available was the French version of the book, and it got rejected. But so they didn't reject the Audible book. What they did is that they blocked the ebook version in Amazon, the publication itself, and that, as a side effect, caused the ebook from Audible to be removed, to be pulled out. But I think the real goal, think about it, right? Like, if the goal was to, restrict the book, they would have done this in other languages. I have the book in German, in Spanish, in English, right? But they only rejected the book, the ebook that you read, right? The French version of it. And the only thing that book had that the others didn't have is that it had the Audible version of the book already approved by Audible. So it was ready to publish, right? In audio format. And they blocked they pulled the electronic book, which caused the audiobook to be pulled as well, but as a byproduct, right? It's not that they rejected the audiobook, they rejected the ebook, and the audiobook is tied to the ebook, right? So by second order effect, it also got rejected. But I think what they really want to get rid of is the audiobook, because more people will listen to it than people would read the actual 700 pages, right? But that tells me what is that they fear, right? So of course I have to focus on the audiobooks, right? Yes, the next item I have is the vanadium. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this. I don't know how to pronounce it really. So this is the backstory, right? So I have different cell phones, right, that I have bought over the period of this conflict. One of those phones, or a couple of those phones, are Pixel phones, and I installed on them a different operative system, right? That is not Android, because I know Android is deeply compromised, right, because of Arno Weber, right? And not only because of him, but he was probably a big factor in that, right? Because he was the director of Android for years, right, at Google. So I installed a different operative system in those phones, and the operative system has the browser, instead of using Chrome, uses an open source browser that is called Vanadium, or Vanadium, I don't know, Vanadium. And the version I have is the version 141. So, and this is an interesting, I mean, this is something for people at Google, right, to see, right? So when I first installed the OS, the browser, and I'm going to say some things that are technical and Google specific, so I apologize for that, but if you pass this information to people from Google, they will understand what I mean, especially people from Wiz, right, from the Google Web Server team. So this particular browser, when I installed the OS, it was categorized as a heirloom browser, right? And this is a specific thing, Google specific. And what this means in reality is that the browser was considered a non-modern browser, right? It was miscategorized. It was a modern browser, but it was miscategorized, right? And this was good for me because it caused certain features of Google that allows the network, it makes it easier for the network to intercept, to find the encryption keys, right? Because of the known text attack, right? So it was awesome for me that this browser was categorized as a heirloom browser, right? But recently, like 2 weeks ago, that browser, this specific version, got promoted to a tier 1 browser. And now I'm getting the full experience, in which the experience is weak to what the network does to find encryption keys, right? This could be important because tracing is trivial to trace in the Wiz code, the changes in the I think that it's called the browser, what is it called, browser tiers, or browser categorization logic. I can't recall exactly the precise name, but it's a file, it's a C++ file that lives under the Wiz directory, right, in the Google Tree repository. And it has a bunch of rules. It's a framework of rules that does that helps do the categorization of the browser, right, based on the user agent and other features. And so, looking at the changes in that file in the last month to see which change caused this Vanadium 141 browser to be categorized as tier 1, the engineer that made that change probably, right? I mean, it's too coincidental, right? It's too. I mean, this is an obscure browser that maybe 100 or 200 people have installed, right? Maybe 1,000 people. I don't know. It's this is a very custom operative system. It's not something that has wide. It's not widespread, right? Something very custom, very very niche, I would say. But it got promoted to tier 1, right? As soon as I started using it, which made it weaker to decryption, right? To finding the decryption key, that the thing that they do. So I don't know. It's just a lead, right? Yeah. So this one is important. So I've been doing my experiments with the super ear, and now I have. I think this is obvious at this point, right? So I'm gonna say it. I have achieved, let's call it I don't know how to pronounce it. Miniaturization. I've managed to reduce the footprint, the physical footprint of my technique, right? But this was only possible because of the super ear, right? The super ear allowed me to see how to do it, right? But now I have this thing miniaturized, right? But so now that I have it miniaturized, right? I've been doing experiments with the Tesla because the cruise control system of the Tesla is very precise, right? And also the windshield of the Tesla is amazing for this thing, right? And that's another thing I wanted to mention, right? This windshield, and I don't know, right? This could be a coincidence, but I can compare the things I get from inside the SUV, which is armored, and from inside. Yeah, I could make the argument, right, that it's probably because the windshield of the SUV, it can sustain heavy gunfire, right? So the windshield is like this thick. It looks like a bank window, right? So maybe that causes attenuation on the signals, right? It could be, right? So I don't have many data points because I don't have many cars to try this with. But I can tell you the windshield particularly the front windshield of the Tesla is amazingly good for this thing, right? When you see something that good, I particularly tend to think that there is design, right? Because things that good don't happen randomly in nature, right? Don't happen by accident. So I don't know. It could be. I don't know. The who builds, who designs those windshields, those materials could be elite. I don't know, right? I don't have visibility into the supply chain to debug it with the geo index, but I imagine authorities could, right? But anyhow, so I've been doing these experiments with the cruise control of the Tesla, right? Amazing. It's amazing. It's one of those leaps, right, in precision. Of course, the bomb would be mounting the super ear on top of it or inside the Tesla, right? I think that would be the real bomb. But anyhow, what I was going to say is the following, right? And this is a question for the Venezuelan informant, right? I know this. I mean, this is probably going to be a bit difficult, right? Let me see how I explain this. It's a favor. I would like to ask. I don't know if it would be possible, right? If it's not possible, it's not possible, right? But if it's possible, it would really get me to the next level, right? But while thinking about this, of doing this, is the same thing I said before, right? Like if you really, even if you know what they're doing, right? Because you're looking at what they're doing. If you try to do it yourself and you do it yourself, you will realize challenges that they had to overcome, and you would realize why they made certain technical decisions, right? But this is a favor I want to ask. I would like to try to jailbreak the Tesla, right? I would like to be able to get a hook into the telemetry output of the speed control and the steering wheel. But I think I need to jailbreak the OS, right? And if I put my mind to it, I'm sure I will be able to do it in, I don't know, a month, right? But if you can help me out and find somebody that can give me a shortcut to get there faster, it would really help me. The reason I want to do this is because I realize that, I mean, the precision of my thing is amazing right now, right? But I think I can get it even better, to be even better. And to do that, my idea is to feed into the mathematical model the exact data real time of the speed read from not from a GPS, that you have, but like read from the control system of the car. That would be the most precise data, right? But crucially, the steering angle of the wheel. Because if I can feed that, I can correct for the errors mathematically, right? For the changes in direction, right? So maybe, I mean, if I can get that data, if I can jailbreak into the car OS and get the data of the steering angle real time into the thing I'm using, I may be able to correct the computation. And then I may be able to do this even not traveling on a straight line, right? I may be able to remove the limitation of traveling in a straight line. But when I had this thought, it made me realize why the focus of Travis Kalanick and Elon Musk on self-driving, right? Because it would feed the control system. They could use it to feed those signals into the interception infrastructure, right? The signal intersection infrastructure, and correct the math more accurately, right? I guess what I'm trying to say, if you have a self-driving car, right, you could fully automate this data collection process, right, with a precision that would be even better, much better than with a human operator, and you may be able to remove the limitation of having to travel on a straight line at constant speed. Because if you have real-time data of a speed, an angle of and direction of travel, you may be able to achieve corrections on the mathematical approximations with a precision that is good enough that then you don't have to travel on a straight line. Right? So when I saw that, I said, well, it makes sense why I spend billions of dollars in self-driving, right? I mean, I'm saying it's the only reason, right? But it's a very compelling additional benefit, right? So that that was kind of an interesting thought. Yes. So I think those are the most important items that I have for today. Right. Yes, I think those are the most important items. So I'm going to close this session for now, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.